If you know it, please sing along. I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change. There is hurting in my family, and there is sorrow in my town. There is panic all across the nation, and there is wailing the whole world around. But I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change. May the children see more clearly, and may the elders be more wise. May the winds of change caress us, even though they burn our eyes. For I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change. Give me a mighty oak to hold my confusion, and give me a desert to hold my fears. Give me a sunset to hold my wonder, and give me an ocean to hold my tears. For I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change.
Oh my goodness, I'm already weepy. Welcome to the Boulder Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I am Reverend Lydia Ferrante Roseberry. I'm the minister of this congregation. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm joined today by Service Associate Paolo Sparti. Today's music is provided by Tad and Emily Korieth. In this selection, Debbie Larson was on percussion, and then we will have Daniel Fields, Amy Austin, and Rex Locker joining us. Today's tech team is Larry Sherwood, Deborah Mensch, and Kathy Partridge as our Zoom host. Hi, Kathy. And everybody on Zoom, hello. As I say the welcome words today, I invite you to imagine that each person hearing these words has some sorrow or some shame in their lives for which today's welcome words can be a balm. You are all welcome here today. In the beauty of languages, cultures, skin tones, shapes and sizes, gifts and challenges that come together in your uniqueness, you are welcome here. In all of the ways you experience and express gender, you are welcome here. In the beauty that is who you love and how you love them, you are welcome here. In all the ways you make your living, in all the places you are from, you are welcome here. With all of the traditions that inform your spiritual life, you are welcome here. And whether your body or soul come wanting support today, or you have arrived with the capacity to help lift someone up, you are welcome here. You are invited to join us with a curious mind, a loving heart, and a willing spirit. We welcome each of you here today. We also acknowledge that the land surrounding us is the unceded territory of the Arapaho people, and that many native peoples roamed freely on this land for millennia before the arrival of white settlers. And we commit ourselves to being a center for spiritual exploration and justice-making, and to anti-racism and anti-oppression work within our hearts and within and beyond the walls of this congregation. We take that commitment seriously. This Sunday, I want to start by recognizing all the people who make up the Sunday service hospitality teams. We have 6 teams here, each made up of 12 to 13 members or leaders. So right now, that's 75 individuals who are part of making this a warm and hospitable place when we arrive, when the rest of us arrive on Sunday morning. Each team serves once every 6 weeks and rotates through assignments such as greeting you at the door or at our welcome center and in the sanctuary, brewing or serving coffee, and welcoming you all at coffee hour. I'm going to invite anybody who is on a team member today, or if you are on Zoom as well, please stand or raise your hand and stay visible long enough for us to pan the sanctuary. So if you are serving in hospitality, one of the 75, and stay, oh look, they all came in from the outside too. Look at them all. So thank you. Thank you so much. This congregation is often praised for our warmth and generosity, and I do believe it is because we have so many helping and beautiful hands here. If you're new here, we are so glad that you found us and hope that you can experience the warmth of this congregation. Please do come back a few times so you can really get to know us. Those on Zoom can check out the links that are going into the chat right now to tell you how to get more connected. And if you're here with us in person today, you can go out to the welcome table after the service and learn how to connect more fully with the congregation. Everyone on Zoom is welcome to stay for casual conversation after the service. That's for you Zoomies. Or attend the Inquirer series, which will begin about 15 minutes following the end of the service. And this Inquirer series is a meet and greet with our elected leaders from the board, the Committee on Shared Ministries, and our Leadership Development Committee. Also following the service today, if you're here in the room, you can help us make those beautiful paper flowers that you may be seeing and have already seen in the fellowship hall for Dia de los Muertos. We have Veronica, who's a friend of this congregation, helping us make those in preparation for a celebration that the Latinx community will be having on November 1st and that we will be having here on November 2nd. Those on Zoom, feel free to greet each other in the chat. Just say your name, and if you're new here, let us know you're new. And those of you in person, just take a moment to say hello to those around you today. Okay. I need to call you back to order this morning. If you have a chalice at home, you can feel free to light it while we light our fellowship chalice. And invite everyone to say the words along with me. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action. And now I'll sing our bowl again, inviting you to just keep listening to the sound as long as you can, and then we'll stay in some silence together to center ourselves for this time.
Let Us Be a People of Not Forgetting by Reverend Karen J. Johnston. As we gather this morning, let us be a people of not forgetting. Let us practice holding collective memories that might otherwise slip into the enormous void that sucks and corrodes any future we hold dear. Let us practice honoring truth-telling, up from the past that must come fully into the now, lest we falter and fail, lest the whole remain in pieces. Let us not our need for comfort or simplicity, for easy forgiveness or false pardon. Smother the heartbreak that still needs healing. Let us practice resilience with reckoning. Let us marry memory and promise. Let us dance in the tension we find there. Let us rest in the integrity we cultivate there. Let us be partners with the possibility that emerges there. It is good we gather.
You gotta keep your heart wide open, though the waves wanna push you around. You gotta keep your heart wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground.
Join in if you'd like to.
I gotta keep my heart wide open.
I gotta keep my heart wide open.
Though the waves wanna push me around.
Though those waves wanna push me around.
I gotta keep my heart wide open till my faith brings brings me back to solid ground.
Till my faith brings me back to solid ground.
We gotta keep our hearts wide open.
We gotta keep our hearts wide open.
Though the waves wanna push us around.
Though the waves wanna push us around.
We gotta keep our hearts wide open till our faith brings us back to solid ground.
Till our faith brings us back to solid ground. Good.
When I think about my heritage, I lean towards the positive stuff. The way my dad's mom's way of making stemperata that he showed me because I never got to meet her. Or the way no one else will ever make biscuits, like my grandmama made biscuits. Or how even joking around about how thick my accent gets when I just talk about my Tennessee family. However, it isn't all fun and recipes. I knew as a kid that there was talk about somewhere in my grandmama's line that she was related to General Robert E. Lee. And I knew in a vague sort of way that it was spoken about as a point of pride. However, I also know that my grandmother deeply disapproved of the Klansmen neighbors and their cross-burning ways. I didn't think of them as racist, but honestly, I didn't think about it very much. I want to tell you a little story about the moment I realized the sort of atrocities that might be hanging around in my family tree. I was in 9th grade, sitting in my physical sciences class in Powder Springs, Georgia, and I remember hearing my mother's maiden name. Now, I'm not comfortable with telling y'all what it is, but I looked up, and a young black man across the room answered to it. I got excited. It's not a common name, and I've never heard it before, associated with anybody but my own family. And they all lived in Tennessee. I remember wanting to go and talk to him after class. I'm not sure why I didn't. Maybe it was social anxiety. Maybe it's just that I'm really, really easily distracted. But I didn't follow through. I did remember when I was telling my family about the day's events. I excitedly told everybody that there was a black guy in my class who had Mama's maiden name. And things got quiet. And then my older brother, who positively loves pouring ice water on anything that I'm excited about, looks at me and he says, "You know how black people get white people's names, right?" It took me a few seconds for what he was saying to get through to me. And I can remember now the shock that ran through my spine when the penny dropped, and the sick feeling in my stomach as I thought, it's an Irish English name. If you're not familiar with what my brother was trying to tell me, it's that it's at least believed that after the Civil War, many freed slaves took the surnames of the slave owners. And we're not really sure why. There are lots of theories about why they might do that. From the mild of they just had way too much other stuff to worry about, to the appalling that they were trying to establish parentage in a way that couldn't be swept under the rug. And I remember thinking how glad I was that I had not gone and talked to that young man. I didn't know what to do with the information then, and I still don't know what to do with the information now. And I haven't taken much action about it since. And I've never tried to really find out whether or not it's my actual relatives or ancestors that could be traced to slave owners. From what I know of my family in Tennessee, they were poor tobacco farmers. And from what my mother says, they were the last kids in their school to get indoor plumbing. It's difficult to reconcile what I know of the actual people who were my relatives and what the evidence appears to show is in our past.
This next song was written by a white Southern man who grew up in that white supremacist culture and his reckoning with that history and his resolve and his urgent resolve to come to terms with that, to acknowledge it, and for all of us to keep working to overcome that terrible heritage. I'm a white man living in a white man's world. Under our roof is a baby girl. I thought this world could be hers one day, but her mama knew better. I'm a white man living in a white man's town. Wanna take a shot of cocaine and burn it down. Mama wants to change that Nashville sound, but they're never gonna let her. There's no such thing as someone else's war. Your creature comforts aren't the only things worth fighting for. You're still breathing, it's not too late. We're all carrying one big burden, sharing one fate. I'm a white man living on a white man's street. I got the bones of the red man under my feet. The highway runs through the burial grounds, past the oceans of cotton. I'm a white man looking in a black man's eyes, wishing I'd never been one of the guys who pretended not to hear another white man's joke. Oh, the times ain't forgotten. There's no such thing as someone else's war. Your creature comforts aren't the only things worth fighting for. You're still breathing, it's not too late. We're all carrying one big burden, sharing one fate. I'm a white man living in a white man's nation. I think the man upstairs must have took a vacation. I still have faith, but I don't know why. Maybe it's the fire in my little girl's eyes. Maybe it's the fire in my little girl's eyes.
Each week, we remind ourselves of the abundance of our lives and this community by giving half of our plate away to those organizations that share our values. This Sunday, we'll be collecting the half plate sorry about that, for the Boulder County 2023 Crop Walk Hunger Walk. In 2023, Crop Hunger Walk is continuing to raise funds to fight against disease, disaster, displacement, and other challenges that leave people hungry. Church World Service, the national organization of the walk, will receive 75% of the funds collected. Community Food Share here in Boulder will continue to receive 24%, and Bread for the World will receive 1%. For over 26 years, our fellowship has supported the Crop Walk to help neighbors near and far get the meals they need for today and sustainable food security for tomorrow. Please donate generously as you so often do. You can text your donation at the number on the screen, or if you're at the fellowship today, you can place your donation in the offering plate as it passes.
for the work of the fellowship and the work of the crop walk, we dedicate our efforts and our offerings. I have always felt really proud of my grandmother, my mom's mom, who was in Padova, Italy. But that's where my mother was raised as well. And it was my mom was raised in the 1940s during World War II. And when my grandmother's Jewish landlords were taken away by the Nazis, my grandmother snuck into their apartment and found their property title so that when they came back, and it was actually their children that came back, they would have proof that they were actually landowners. It's a beautiful story, and I feel such pride, so much pride about it. But I've never known what to do about my own father's teenage participation in the Mussolini youth program. I know it was compulsory, but I barely ever heard him speak about it. And I never heard him denounce the fascist propaganda that he was raised with. I don't know if there's a person alive who doesn't have some part of their family history that they don't quite know what to do with. And when I say family, it could be your own personal family lineage, but it could also be your cultural lineage. Because from the Christian Crusades, many of us I know were raised Christians, and we have the Christian Crusades in our backgrounds, to what we're seeing in the Middle East, which I'll be talking about later, to what this country has done to Native Americans. I mean, it's all there. We have a history of violence towards one another, either individually in our small family systems or culturally. Many particularities of our own histories are buried, permanently forgotten in word or in deed, but believe me, they live on. My father was raised in a family where acceptable child-rearing practices, including beatings when he wasn't at home in time for dinner. I'm so grateful that he healed enough from that so that although he was a strict father in the very traditional sense, he did not bring the beatings that he was raised with into his own parenting. I can see that growth in him as a person. But for all of his growth as a family man and for his generosity and good deeds as a family physician, my father remained anti-Semitic his whole life, and racist and sexist, for that matter. It is hard to talk about our painful family legacies. And we need to do so carefully so that we are not inflicting more harm in the recounting. And it seems to me that the larger and the more complex the issues, the harder it can feel. But there also is a cost to remaining silent about our family histories of harm, as well as our national and international ones. And this is where the sermon's going to take a big left turn or right turn, depending upon your political affiliation. Because we are now living in a painful time where half a world away, Israelis and Palestinians are again inflicting unspeakable violence against each other in a conflict that goes back not only generations, but actually millennia. How do we make sense of all that suffering? What do we say and do? I recognize that I have been silent about this latest horror in Palestine, going on for 3 weeks now. I've often found that it's hard for me to have a word of protest or comfort right there at the ready when my own mind and heart are reeling. The atrocities we've witnessed, even from 7,000 miles away, are heartbreaking. Sometimes I wish I was better at chiming in on important current events. And then sometimes it all sounds like polarized rhetoric that just keeps people justified in their positions, depending upon where they get their news. And then I just don't want to add to that fray. And with something as charged as the conflict in the Middle East, of which I'm not an expert by any means, I feel sure that I will say something that may be either factually incorrect or just inflame one side or the other of this seemingly intractable conflict. So that's my fear, right? And that's what keeps me silent sometimes. But I don't like my silence. It's not a helpful silence. It's not a comforting silence. It's a silence brought out of fear. In a recent post, Native American activist, author, and economist Winona Duke wrote about silence as it is related to the interconnectedness of heritages of hurt. She wrote, European Americans in the United States can't talk about Gaza because we can't talk about Israel. Because we can't talk about Israel because we can't talk about Wounded Knee. We can't talk about Sand Creek or the Carlisle boarding school. Because we can't talk about forced sterilization or smallpox blankets, and because we have Andrew Jackson on our $20 bill. Because we are one huge settlement on stolen land. I know that the silence also speaks. My rabbi friend shared recently how hurt and isolated he's felt by the silence among progressives in this area and nationally, by their inability to even acknowledge the atrocity committed by Hamas, no matter how they feel about Israel's abhorrent treatment of Arabs in Palestine. Anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are on the rise in this country, more intensely fueled when the Middle East conflicts erupt as they just have. We need to speak about the atrocities of our past so we can get to healing. And we need to speak about what's happening in our midst so we can move to healing. When things are flared up as they are now, what's needed is people to hear the pain on both sides. So I speak today about the complex heritage of hurt in the Middle East as I would about any complex heritage of hurt. Not so much from a political lens, but from the viewpoint of a fellow human being living 7,000 miles away, who for reasons more complex than I can name or that I even know, often remains speechless in the name of horrors, in the face of these horrors. Sahar M. Vardi is a 33-year-old Jewish Israeli activist from Jerusalem who has, in her short life, watched Israel turn more and more right-wing and less able to acknowledge its own history of harm. Shortly after the October 7th Hamas attack, she wrote a blog piece that she called Dual Loyalty. Dual loyalty, she said, is seeing both this and that with tears in your eyes. It's a moment to talk to friends who don't know their family members, don't know if their family members are dead or kidnapped, or why to hope, and to see the helplessness, the fear, and the deep pain. And then a moment later, talking to a friend in Gaza who says that every night now is the scariest night of his life. He calculates his chances and his children's of getting up tomorrow morning. Dual loyalty is letting the heart break from both one and from the other. Loyalty may not be the right word, she said. It's dual pain, dual heartbreak, care, love. It's to hold everyone's humanity. And it's hard. It's hard to have humanity here, she writes from Jerusalem. It's exhausting. And it feels like time after time the world is just asking you to let go. It's much easier to choose a side. It doesn't matter which side, she writes. Just choose it and stick with it, and at least reduce the amount of pain you hold. And at least feel part of a group and less alone in all of this. She continues, as if that's really an option. As if we don't understand that our pains are intertwined and that there is no solution only to the pain of Afikim, the southern Israeli town swarmed by Hamas, without a solution to the pain of Khan Yunis, the southern Gaza town bombarded by Israel. And we know it, and we recite it, and we heard it again and again. It is heartbreaking and soul-crushing, she writes. It feels like the only optimism I can have right now is that dual loyalty exists and that it's possible. And that the pain of some of us in our small community hold, this dual loyalty, is probably the hope that remains in this place. When I think about what's going on over there, the words that keep coming back to me are hurt people, hurt people. Generation upon generation of violence and trauma have created whole cultures that have a patterned traumatic response. In his fabulous book, My Grandmother's Hands, trauma expert Resmaa Menakem writes, whenever one group opposes, victimizes, brutalizes, or marginalizes another, many of the victimized people may suffer trauma and then pass that trauma response to their children as standard operating procedure. And when I think about this, about one group oppressing and victimizing and marginalizing, in the case of the Middle East, that is one group, then the next group, then one group, then the next group, in my view. Children, he writes, children, he writes, are highly susceptible to this because their young nervous systems can easily be overwhelmed by things that older, more experienced nervous systems, bodies, are able to override. And the result is a soul wound or intergenerational trauma. Research is now showing that this transferring of trauma isn't just about how human beings treat each other. It can be inherited genetically. Trauma is inherited genetically. Recent work in genetics have revealed that trauma can change the expression of the DNA in our cells, and that these changes can be passed on from parent to child. Hurt people hurt people. And when the hurt goes on for generations, the hurt goes on for generations. If, as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, a riot is the language of the unheard, how much unheard, unacknowledged pain must exist for the atrocities we have seen committed on both sides of this ongoing Middle East conflict. And of course, it's so much more complicated than we can even imagine. There remains the question of how people defend themselves against violence against them. And I think about the people of Ukraine as well, who are similarly impacted by violence against them. And how that happens in our countless times in our communities, our families, and between individuals. But it's also clear to see that the Middle East is exemplary of a fundamental human challenge, that when we are hurt, we want to hurt back, and that each violent act is received with a call for retribution in our nervous systems. Whether an immediate blow, whether it's planned for decades, or as we've seen in the Palestinian people, a slow erosion of basic human rights of an entire population. But that violence in whatever form does not bring resolution, only pain and more violence. But I'm here to tell you that there's also a corollary to hurt people, and that is that healed people heal people. Healed people heal people. So in the midst of the travesty beyond words, one thing that we can do is amplify the voices of the healers. In an article in Positive News shared that amid the horrors of this war, it's easy to forget that out there on both sides of the border are ordinary people working tirelessly in their communities and across divides to achieve peace. Among these groups are the Stand Together movement, reputed to be the largest Arab-Israeli grassroots groups in Israel, which has united to help victims of violence on both sides of the conflict. Among these groups are Combats for Peace, Israel-Palestine. These are ex-combatants who founded this joint Israeli-Palestinian nonprofit, and they were once part of the cycle of violence, and now they've put down their weapons and are promoting peace. And Women Wage Peace in Israel, which is linked to the Women of the Sun, its Palestinian counterpart. They empower women on both sides of the border to shore up support for peace in their communities and build trust across divides. Founded in the aftermath of the Gaza war, the 2014 Gaza war, Women Waging Peace has 45,000 Israeli members. So they're out there. The healers are out there. What I'm curious about is how did these people living in these situations for generation after generation become the healers? And how do we learn from these healers about how we can heal our own generational pain and how we can amplify healing in this world and not hurt? So here on our soil, here amongst us, I know I must grow out of my own reluctance to speak out when I see pain around me. Those of you who know me well know this is a pattern of mine, and it will be a lifelong challenge for me, and it is one that I need to accept. And as a community, we must also be willing to risk to be healers. And part of being healers is truth-telling. We must risk to reach out to those living in fear of violence, even if we don't agree with the actions of their leaders. A UUA statement on the crisis in the Middle East stated that our role as a people of faith is to be clear about our values and center love for our siblings, especially in the midst of a humanitarian crisis. It said, we commit ourselves to do all we can to support those who are closest to the violence as we continue to hold hope for a peaceful future. And we remain dedicated to doing what we can to be advocates for safety and well-being in every part of the world. I love that ideal, and that's why I love our faith so much. But I also need to tell you that I learned this morning that a UU congregation in New Jersey canceled an event organized by the Jewish Voice for Peace, local Quakers, and the Veterans for Peace group. And the event was about the plight of Palestinian children. And they were concerned about it being too controversial. I hope that if I or other congregational leaders are shying away from an event like this, we will be lovingly called into account to live our values. and that I hope and pray that our congregation would take a risk like this, knowing that the fate of children of all faiths and races rests on our capacity to have difficult conversations about the heritage of harm. May this be our promise and our prayer. Blessed be.
Oh, beloveds, let us sing together. We'll invite you to rise in body or in spirit. We'll sing number 159 in the gray hymnal. This is my song, number 159.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Now I invite us into our time of community connection, our time of sacred sharing of the joys and concerns in our lives. I'll add a couple more stones. I would like to add a stone for all of the places in the world that are war-ravaged in these moments, and all of the people who are living in fear, having each night be their scariest night ever. And a second stone for all of the people who are unhoused, many of whom have mental illness or substance abuse disorders as the weather is beginning to turn towards being more cold. that we as a people here may find ways to respond more compassionately to our unhoused community. And finally, a stone for all of those joys and concerns that remain in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, knowing that even in our silence we are bound together in the web of life. Beloveds, and you truly are beloveds. It seems that we're living in times when more and more is being asked of us. Just when we think we've sort of made it through something like, oh, I don't know, a pandemic. Other things keep arising. May it be our task to find ways to keep our own bodies and spirits safe and also courageous. May we recognize those moments when it is our time to comfort, to speak up, and to be in a kind of silence that is a silence where love speaks, not a silence brought on by fear. May we find ways, even in these challenging times, to celebrate with one another and cherish with gratitude the lives that we have, the incredible abundance among us, and to know that the world has always had joy and suffering together in one plane. When we are able to lift up joy, lift up healing, be the healers ourselves, and accept healing when we so need it, then we find the circle of life and love flourishing. May this be our promise and our prayer, to speak truth lovingly, to be healers when we can, and to accept the love, joy, and abundance that truly does also surround us in these times. Blessed be. And I have a few announcements for the good of the congregation. Today's inquiry session will start here in about 15 minutes. It will be a meet the leaders, and so you can ask them about how the congregation functions, what their hopes and dreams are for the congregation, and maybe even questions about this transition we are going through as a congregation. The memorial for Diane Witt is at 3 p.m. today here in our sanctuary, and you are invited to wear bright colors at the request of the family. And there's a Zoom link for the memorial. It's going into the chat, and I'm going to believe it's available in Connections Weekly. Is that correct? Yes. Janet said yes. Okay. And there's a meeting next, I believe it's next Saturday from 10 to noon. It will be in the Fellowship Hall, Exploring Consciousness as Spiritual Practice. All members and friends are invited as we talk about non-ordinary states of consciousness and the historical and current use of entheogens, such as psilocybin, and their relationship to mystical experience. There'll be a short presentation followed by an opportunity for people to share their own experiences, entheogenic or mystical experiences that have informed their own spiritual journeys. And for more information, you can contact Shanti Samani or Chris Rathweg. And our auction is coming up in 2 weeks. Time to sail into auction. Tickets are on sale for those attending in person on Saturday, November 4th. Donations of items are still being accepted. You can bring food or drink as well, donate those, and your time is also welcome as a volunteer at that event. You can find the link to the auction on our BVUF homepage or talk to Scott Yeomans or Julie McKenzie after the service in Fellowship Hall. And that's what I have. So now we will extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, or the energy of action. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. I invite you to rise or embody your spirit, join hands with one another, link arms, or give yourself a hug. Make room for me. Beloveds, let this gift of touch remind you that we are not alone. We are never alone. We are in a time where we are asked to do courageous things and live courageous, heartfelt lives. May we go forth willing to do so and knowing that we do so in the companionship of others. Blessed be. Amen.